Happy Hump Day, folks. Wednesday, March 10th, 2021. You're watching the Daily Mix TV. Hi, my name is Sean Patrick Hillman. Just a fair warning to y'all, I am extra salty today, so just hold on to your seats. It's going to be a bumpy ride. First couple of stories, not so bad. After that, gets interesting. On to the news. Disney Plus has surpassed 100 million global subscribers. The milestone hits less than 18 months after launch and signals a faster growing rate than the competitive set, including Netflix, Hulu, HBO Max, and Amazon Prime Video. Now, Disney is forecasting about 250 million subscribers within 3 years. In contrast, Netflix has about 215 million global subscribers, 215. So when you think about that, Disney was able to achieve the 100 million mark a year and a half after launch, just under that. And they did it through smart marketing partnerships, collaborations, and exclusive content. Very, very smart. Not that that's a surprise. I mean, come on. When you look at what they've done, okay, and how they achieved 100 million global subscribers, they did a partnership with Verizon wherein if you became a new Verizon wireless customer, you got Disney Plus free for a year on your phone. If you signed up for Verizon Fios, same thing. When you look at content, Disney Plus was the exclusive home of The Mandalorian, which during the pandemic was everywhere. Everybody wanted to see The Mandalorian. It was brilliantly done. So for Disney, it was incredibly smart, and timing did play a big role in this. I mean, come on, you got everybody trapped at home for almost a year, and of course your numbers are going to go up. But that doesn't take away from the intelligent decisions that Disney made during that time period to help pump that growth. Now, speaking of Disney Plus, okay, I haven't always been fair, believe it or not, with respect to their attempts to warn viewers about older thematics in their earlier animations like Dumbo, Peter Pan, and more. As a matter of fact, I've gone out of my way to slam it only because I don't believe in censorship, unless you're talking about immediate and undue harm, such as a riot or, a homicide, those kinds of things. Yesterday, and clearly somebody at Disney thought this through, and they thought it through well. Yesterday, Disney put in new parental controls to prevent children under the age of 7 from seeing movies like Peter Pan, Dumbo, and more. Now, I prefer that to outright cancellation or removal altogether of this content from the platform, at least with parental controls. And Disney did go out of their way to explain this. At least with parental controls, parents are still able to show those movies to their children if they believe it's okay, if they believe their kids are mature enough. That is the prime difference between what's going on in general and a company that genuinely cares about content, history, and their consumers. It really is an interesting dichotomy. Looking at Disney's treatment of what they call outdated cultural depictions, that's the label that they use in the upper left-hand corner as the Muppets are coming on or as Dumbo and Peter Pan and so on are coming on the screen. That versus Warner Brothers' blatant cancellation of Pepe Le Pew and the attempted cancellation of Speedy Gonzales. At least with Disney, they aren't flat out trying to erase a history people aren't comfortable with. And again, this is all about responding to cancel culture and woke culture. So, here's my advice for everybody. Get uncomfortable, folks, and get used to it. Cancel culture is not here to stay, neither are the woke culture. Why? Back in the 90s, the politically correct movement was absurd. I mean, every minute of every day there was a new cause or a new protest or a new whatever. That went away. This too shall pass. So it's going to be interesting to see how Disney continues to evolve with respect to their content in addressing viewer concerns and things like that. Personally, I'm very proud of Disney for this. I think it's a move in the right direction, and it certainly allows people who love and appreciate those time-honored animated films it certainly addresses their love for that versus just flat out pulling all content that someone somewhere might find offensive. Everyone has had a Kind bar at least once in their life. Now, my first Kind experience was on a JetBlue flight to Fort Lauderdale. When JetBlue had launched, they had done a deal with Kind for distribution and things like that, which was very smart. Kind is a great product. It's very well made. It's well positioned, smart marketing. Now, boy, have they got a cool thing. They're putting a new frozen spin on breakfast. The brand is rolling out its new frozen smoothie bowl line, which features a fruit and almond milk base, and it's topped with nut butter and granola. Quote, "Since day one, Kind has been committed to upholding our brand promise to create innovative premium foods that are both healthy and tasty. While this category is new for us, it's consistent with how we've always entered new aisles, with an eye to elevate people's overall experience while adhering to our Kind promise." And that's Daniel Lubetzky, who's the Kind founder and executive chairman. The line is available in 4 flavors: almond and mango pineapple passion fruit, almond and triple better acai almond, almond and chocolate banana, and almond and peach kiwi greens. So, excuse me, when I think about the product mix and how Kind is doing this, it's very smart. You guys know I'm a big fan of product innovation, especially from a marketing standpoint. This allows Kind to get brand exposure in another aisle of the store, and they have always been very smart about that. They were one of the first to market with their approach in terms of their ingredients, better for you, that kind of thing. And on top of it, their distribution methodology has always been smart. So I'm looking forward to seeing how this works out for them. Congratulations, Kind. Brilliant strategy. Great product dev. All right, here's where we get a little salty. It looks like Coca-Cola is under fire yet again, this time from a group of Hispanic business consortia that has historically been one of the soda makers' biggest boosters. Coca-Cola has been helping to fund Hispanic and Latino business growth across supermarket and convenience store segments for over 30 years. Coca-Cola has been helping to fund Hispanic and Latino business growth across those markets for a reason. At that time, the Latino population was growing exponentially. So from a marketing and business development standpoint, they went after that. They even had an Office of Latin Affairs to help with their community relationships, as well as store owners and so on. So the trouble begins all last October. The Atlanta-based company announced that they would be allocating $500 million in supply chain spending for Black-owned enterprises for the next 5 years. Nothing wrong with that. That's great. That's absolutely brilliant, really cool community program, right? Wrong. Here's the problem. They literally shuttered the Office of Latin Affairs shortly after that announcement. And as such, since October, Coca-Cola's pulled back on their financial support in the Hispanic and Latino communities, leaving many to believe that the company is forsaking one minority group for another in a bid to chase revenues. Now, let's look at an example of what I mean. Back in, I guess it was 2012, right, when the mayor of New York City, known as Nanny Pants Michael Bloomberg, was going after soda companies and trying to impose a soda tax, Frank Garcia, who's the chairman of the National Association of State Latino Chambers of Commerce, fought tooth and nail for Coca-Cola. Garcia was quoted in Crain's this morning as saying, "I went against Bloomberg for the soda tax, and now they want to eliminate the office and give most of the money to Black Lives Matters and give us crumbs. The community that distributes Coca-Cola, why isn't Coca-Cola making the same investment in what they're doing with African American businesses, with the Latino and bodega businesses that are going under?" Now, interestingly enough, the crisis communications folks at Coca-Cola must be on absolute overdrive. They've stated to several media outlets that they've integrated the duties of the Office of Latin Affairs across many of their internal business units and that it just wasn't needed any longer. Okay. Well, if that's true, then why did you do a full 180-degree turnaround reopening that office after experiencing more pressure under fire. In other words, you're chasing a narrative, and shame on you for that. Now, in addition to restoring the Latin Affairs Office, the coalition demanded funding for diversity contracts from Coca-Cola. Basically, they saw the writing on the wall. Now, from that same Crain's interview, Frank Garcia also stated, "We threaten to boycott them if they think of cutting money to supply diversity contracts to the Hispanic community. CEO Alfredo Rivera needs to understand, don't try to mess with my Hispanic community when we've supported Coca-Cola." So now Coca-Cola's been caught telling people they need to be less white in a diversity seminar, and they pulled back from spending from the support of the Hispanic and Latino communities that have helped them build their business. So that's all to chase a narrative in the hopes that it would lead to higher revenues. So this is exactly what is wrong with business today. And shame on you, Coca-Cola, for this. Because you know what? I am tired of seeing public companies that support communities for all the right reasons at that time and then forsake that to chase a white whale. There is not a snowball's chance in hell your core consumer, of which I used to be one, is going to support this. You went out, you worked with the Hispanic and Latino communities to help build your business, and now you're pulling back on that spend to go chase a new shiny object. I mean, that's the mentality it is. Now, please don't get me wrong, folks. I am all for supporting minority populations. And I don't mean minority in terms of black or Latino or any of those things. I mean minority in terms of total population count. So I'm all for supporting underserved communities. I'm all for supporting those minority populations. But when you forsake one for the other because you're chasing a trend or a narrative, that's where you get into trouble. And frankly, I think that what Coca-Cola has done is reckless and dangerous, and I hope their shareholders go after executive management for this. Now, I think we're going to continue down the salty road. Remember, folks, words matter, especially on a social platform. So let's be frank here. In the last 15 years, I have watched as my fellow journalists have returned the media back to its yellow days of the McCarthy era, often forsaking their responsibility in favor of a political slant or their outlets' advertising revenue. Now, there's a prevailing narrative to what the media are selling, and we all know it. Don't kid yourself. It's not a Republican thing. It ain't a Democrat thing. This is a reality. And for once, it isn't CNN that's supporting this effort. It's actually a LinkedIn News reporter, believe it or not. Excuse me. Now, I can say that about CNN because I was a producer there, so I know the agenda. But LinkedIn is usually very middle of the road from their editorial point of view. So now check this out. As you can see in the headline, are we kidding? I mean, really? Shame on LinkedIn News for this fear-inciting headline when, frankly, it's patently false. These retailers are not teaming up to survive as the headline suggests. Is what Kohl's, Target, and Nordstrom are doing saddling up with Sephora, Apple, and Peloton out of desperation? No. Most of these retailers have done extremely well during the pandemic through their e-commerce platforms. At least CNN positioned this new series of store-within-a-store agreements as a trend, and it's focused purely on pulling in more shoppers, while LinkedIn News just blatantly pressed the fear button. Wow. So let's break this down. Survive. What does that suggest to you? Exactly. And it's patently false. CNN took the high road here and approached it from a very pragmatic, unbiased point of view. However, this LinkedIn News reporter, and I'm not going to name her because I'm sure this was just an erroneous mistake. Not so much. After all, LinkedIn News bills itself as bringing you the business and professional insights you need to stay informed while adding your voice to the conversation. Our team of 75 plus editors across 15 countries create, curate, and cultivate content through posts, articles, trending news, LinkedIn lists, daily rundown, and more. We cover every industry and business from healthcare and frontline workers to venture capital, financial services, and tech to small business owners. Our global team of editors has previously worked at Forbes, Fortune, HBR, Nikkei, Bloomberg, Reuters, Wall Street Journal, Wired, and more. All right. Now, That's what LinkedIn News really is, okay? Sadly, the reporter who wrote this unfortunate, misleading, and fear-monger-inducing headline has never actually held a job at a news organization other than as a reporter for her college paper. Now, in other words, she's fresh out of college the year before the pandemic hit and is now writing headlines for LinkedIn News. Now, while I appreciate her specific path, and believe it or not, I believe she's a good writer, I've gone and looked at some of her earlier work, this headline is just reckless and irresponsible. These retailers aren't struggling to survive. In fact, Sephora, Apple, and Target have done very well during the pandemic. Same for Peloton. So the headline is really misleading. And there's already enough fear in the market. So here's my advice for this reporter. Please, 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 do not fall into the trap of opinion-based headlines or fear-mongering to drive clicks. It's irresponsible, and it's reckless, and in some cases, illegal. Normally, LinkedIn News is really solid in terms of a neutral voice, which is why this surprised me as much as it did. So I'm hoping this was just a one-off for this reporter. I may be wrong, but only time will tell. Hopefully, this prompts them to go back in and change that headline, because I just can't imagine that anyone with any modicum of professionalism thinks that this is okay. It's not. It's a narrative, it's clear as day, and it needs to stop. We have to get back to the days where fact, not opinion, is what is driving the news. Hopefully, sooner than later. Now, speaking of LinkedIn, I was running through my feed this morning at some ungodly hour when the sun wasn't even up yet, and I ran across this post by Robert Furness Rowe, who's the current CEO of Samson & Surrey. Samson & Surrey describes itself as uniting the very best craft brands in the world as one family. Real brands made by real people with real stories. Now, they represent Few Spirits of Chicago, Blue Coat Gins of Philadelphia, local favorite and my personal favorite, Widow Jane Whiskies of Brooklyn, and then Brené French, which is a single malt of cognac, and then Mezcal Vago of Oaxaca. So Robert was one of the CEOs I worked for when I was representing Bacardi Rums and Bacardi USA Corporate. Now, I bring this post up because it sums up what we're feeling in New York right now perfectly. Slowly but surely, New York is awakening from a very dark winter and looking forward to a spring of hope. New York, we love you and can't wait for you to blossom again. Truer words were never spoken. The photo of the Widow Jane out-of-home execution was taken on the corner of West Broadway and West Houston, right above Dos Caminos in Soho. Great spot, brilliant. I love the Creative Affinity campaign, Robert. Thank you very much. Great job. This is where private companies and brands can help cities like New York. Supporting the local community through spending on media, promotion, and more in order to drive traffic to businesses that desperately need it. Specifically, when you think of hospitality, this photo says it all. We love you, New York City. And subliminally, it is all about supporting businesses like Dos Caminos and independent bars and restaurants in that neighborhood. I mean, think about it. Soho has a very high concentration of bars and lounges, certainly tapas venues, those kinds of things. So for a company like Samson & Surrey to do this, very cool. Love it, Robert. Keep up the great work. All right, this month, on a personal note, this month marks my last columns in New York Lifestyles magazine. It's been a hell of a year writing my New York Rant and Great Bites columns. Now, I just received my copies of the magazines the other day, and I wanted to say a big thank you to publisher Bill Mason and my now former editor-in-chief, Patricia. Pat, love you to death, my dear. Great people to work with. If you have an opportunity to work with Great Lifestyles, either from an integrated marketing perspective or business development perspective, or even as a writer, by all means, go for it. I decided to step back from the magazine because things are starting to heat up on my end in terms of businesses I've been developing during this pandemic. So I'll still be writing and reporting, just from a little bit of a different medium, and when I can talk about it more, I absolutely will. In closing, and certainly on a very personal level, Ricky, this one's for you, buddy. All right, guys, my name is Sean Patrick Hillman. I'm out of time. If you guys have any questions, comments, or story ideas, please email thedailymixtv@gmail.com. Have a great hump day. We'll see you tomorrow.